Look at this. We are good to go, team. Thank you so much for joining us. Team, you guys could have been anywhere tonight on a Wednesday evening, but you chose to be with us, and we're super excited tonight because I'm Thomas Rowe, and I'm the co-founder of Blueprint to Blue Chip. I'm a sports performance coach, have been for 25 years. And one of the things that I always focus on was bigger, faster, stronger, bigger, faster, stronger. And tonight, along with my co-hosts, and my co-founder, Aaron Charles, we are sitting down with Mia Zambarano. Did I get that correct, Mia?
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Sweet. So, team, one of the things that we've reached out in our network is, if you've been following us for some time, we have podcasts. Mia's been on the podcast. We also have Path to the Pros, where we talk with current and former professional athletes as well as Olympians and talk about how their path to the pros. But one of the things that we always circle back to is mental performance. So tonight our episode is redefining mental health from reactive to proactive with Mia. So I'm going to turn over the camera to her. Mia, tell us, first of all, Mia, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited about everything you have to share because we're excited to learn about your background. And then how did you get into this space of mental performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on tonight. I'm very excited to chat with you all, answer some questions, and get into some great topics. So I played Division I soccer up at Sacred Heart University while I was getting my degree in psychology. If I'm being completely honest with you guys, I had no idea those two worlds were going to merge one day. I went into clinical psychology and social work and counseling thinking I was going to primarily do family therapy and traditional therapy. And I did at the beginning of my career over 10 years ago. And as I got into the field, I got more and more inquiries from current and former athletes once they would see my bio that I was a soccer player. And through a lot of the modalities, so that's kind of like frameworks that I was trained in, I was realizing it was the best work I was doing. And I was having so much fun with it. We were finding really incredible results on both a mental health level and what ended up being a mental performance level. So once I went into private practice, I kind of rewrote the script a little bit. There was the aspect of mental health, and then there's kind of the higher level functioning of mental performance that I treat as two separate services. And those things are we're going to talk about this a little bit. While they're different, they're not separate. They actually very much function together. So again, when I went into private practice, one of the other things I realized was there's only one of me and there's only so much time in a day. So I really started to focus on group work, which was something in the clinical realm I was really focusing on as well. So I started running team sessions and really kind of specialize in that work now, both in person and virtually. And it's been an absolute blast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we know that it's needed, definitely, for sure. So, Amia, as promised, and I don't know if I got here just a second or two behind Aaron, one of the things that we like to do with our audience is we don't like to talk to them. We don't like to lecture them. What we do is I know that we have 5 pillars that you're going to go over tonight, and then we're going to open up the platform to make this very interactive for our guests. And so let's get into the first pillar, and then you can kind of give your insight on that. And then we already have questions coming in, and we'll see how they fall into space.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Do we want to talk about defining mental health first? Because I feel like that's a really important piece.
Absolutely. This is your platform. This is your space. So please, by all means, go for it.
So those who are listening in and following along, whether you're typing into a channel or just kind of doing this for yourself, I want you to think about how you define mental health. Something I am huge on, especially during Mental Health Awareness Month, is helping people understand what it really is. So just think to yourself and jot down a few things like, what do you think it is? How would you define it? If someone asked you that question, like I'm asking you right now, how would you respond? What is mental health? And even if you want to cue into as an athlete, what does that look like? So if you look at a fundamental definition of mental health, it's really the quality of your well-being, of your thoughts, your emotions, your cognitive, like how you receive and process information, right? Your cognitive functioning. So do you all think? Do you all feel? Do you all receive information? Answer is yes, right? So I think something that gets misinterpreted of like, do I have this? Like, is this something I need to focus on? The answer is yes, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. So I
Right.
think when you reestablish your relationship with it's something that you have, are you nurturing it or are you waiting until it bottoms out and then trying to, you know, fill up the tank of gas that already went kaput, right? Like what are we doing to kind of build that relationship within yourself, the quality of your thoughts, the quality of when your emotions come up, how do I understand them? How do I interpret them? How do I manage them? And again, how are you processing information? And as an athlete, that's so amplified. The processes are so much more intense. So understanding that it's not a luxury, it's an essential, it's part of what makes us human. And in fact, athletes aren't exempt from that. It's amplified, right? Which is why we see so much of this come up. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of stories come out about athletes that are struggling with their mental health. So this is why when you ask more of yourself, you have to give more. And unfortunately, not enough effort and time is put into the preparation.
For sure.
Now, when you look at mental, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was
You can
going to
chime
say
in.
the questions are already starting to roll in, and I've got. If you don't mind, hold that thought because
Please.
I've got a D2 women's volleyball player, and she asked, "What's
Mhm.
the actual difference between mental health and mental performance?" I thought they were the same thing. Like, if my mental health is good, doesn't that mean my mental performance is good?
That is such an incredible question. Thank you for that. And it's a very common one. So think of again, mental health and physical health as being along the same lines, right? You can have a healthy heart rate, you can be in shape, but does that mean you're going to go out on the field and perform at your best? Right? Similarly with your mental health, right? That's kind of your baseline of functioning, right? So think of that as your baseline. Now, the better your baseline, the better you're going to perform. So mental performance is the quality in which you complete a certain task, right? So that's where you hear performance anxiety is different than general anxiety. It's more
Sure.
focused on a certain thing or task or element, right? So again, while they're different, they're very much related. And that's a big mistake so many even providers make as they treat them as this like, nope, we're talking about this or we're just talking about this. But the reality is if you're an athlete, especially a highly competitive or elite athlete, they are very much working together. I mean, this is your mental health. Your mental performance is built off of the foundation of your mental health. If you're not able to regulate your emotions in terms of your mental health, it's going to be nearly impossible to do that when you add the load of competing and comparison and all these other things that may or may not come up in the field. So hopefully that makes sense. They're very much related, but think of mental health as your baseline, like your heart rate, your blood pressure, right? Like all of those things. But then how you're performing at that higher level, how you're completing those higher level tasks is your mental performance.
For sure. This is a great one. Hi, Mia. I don't want to say I'm struggling with mental health because it sounds like I'm broken or I need therapy. I was recruited, played football at the University of Oregon, and transferred to Montana State. But I need help managing pressure and anxiety. The pressure that I had at Oregon versus Montana State was incredibly difficult. Is that
Mhm.
mental health or mental performance? And does it matter what I call it?
The answer is both. So again, I love these questions, and I never want anyone to feel like it's taboo to admit you're struggling. I actually think that's the strongest thing you could do. That's a self-assessment skill. We all struggle at some point. I
Sure.
have been at this point, I've gone through the college athletics, I've gone through professional world. I'm a mother of 3 kids. Like we're going to struggle. That's part of being human. There's nothing wrong with that. I love the distinguishment. I've heard this in a multiple settings, especially if you look into psychology. But there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is
Sure.
inevitable. We're going to go through things. We're going to go through injuries. We're going to go through hardships. We're going to go through personal times. Suffering is when you almost choose not to help yourself. It's like when you stay in the pain longer than needed, right? We're going to experience pain, but are you doing something for yourself? So that's the first thing I want to say. Never feel like it's a weakness to admit you're struggling. You are doing more harm than good by not acknowledging it. This is a very valuable life skill of knowing like something's not working. How do I then move forward? Right. That kind of that awareness gives you the roadmap to move forward. Now, what you're talking about, so many people relate to this. There's transition, there's pressure, there's expectations. And even now, like, I mean, there's a whole nother stage now between social media, NIL, and transfer portal, everything, right?
Right.
So this is actually a very normal, I don't want to say normal, it's a common experience, difference between normal and common. You don't want to normalize something that's abnormal. Now, when you say, is it mental health or mental performance? And does it matter what I call it? Such a great question. Mental health. So again, if I'm struggling with my mental health or I'm having anxiety or something, is my functioning being impacted? Am I having trouble focusing? Am I having trouble performing at my greatest capacity? Am I having trouble, like, do you get what I'm saying? So that's your
Yep.
mental health. Am I having trouble functioning or completing tasks or expectations that are within my what are being proposed to me within my responsibilities, right? Socially or communication, your emotional regulation. Am I a lot of a common symptom of anxiety or depression is actually irritability. It kind of is like a hidden symptom, right? So then if you look at mental performance, again, is it related to a specific task? Is it when you line up at the starting line for a time test? Is it before a game? Is it after a game, right? So is there something that's throwing you off that when that would be more of mental performance, right? Kind of that higher level functioning. It's more specific. You're able to kind of identify where there's barriers, where there's blocks to something that could be better. I make a mistake, I start to crumble. Okay, that's mental performance. That's something you would want to address in that realm. Now, again, that being said, when that goes unaddressed, it can affect your mental health. Again, the two are not disconnected, they're very much related. So the answer is probably both, right? If you feel like it's very isolated to football or lacrosse or swimming or whatever it might be, it's probably more your mental performance or performance anxiety. But if you feel like it's kind of spilling over into your personal life, or now you're having trouble falling asleep, or that is mental health, right? Because again, it's that quality of your functioning, of your well-being. And does it matter what you call it? It does, because it depends on how you target and what kind of professional you might start with. So I think anybody could be, you want to start somewhere, right? If you are willing to reach out for help, even if whether it's a teammate or a coach or a mentor or someone that used to play, start somewhere. But if you're really going to do the work, please make sure you're working with a professional, because especially with social media and stuff, so many people are giving advice without having a proper foundation or framework or understanding. So the beautiful thing is, what a lot of you guys don't realize is a consultation is completely free. You could talk to a professional or provider completely free just to ask questions or find out, hey, is this right for me? So you guys don't have to know the answer to that. And that's part of why we're doing this tonight too, is you don't have to know the answer.
For sure.
Ask the questions. But that was a really fantastic question. I hope I answered it in a way
Well,
that feels clear.
I think you did, because it's going to lead right into this one. Hey, Mia, I play. It's so nice to see a fellow soccer player. I play soccer at Idaho State. Go Bengals! What if you're dealing with both? Like, I have diagnosed anxiety, but I also
Yep.
want to perform better under pressure. How do you
Mhm.
work on both at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the good news, like I said, they're related. So one of the biggest mistakes I see, especially in athletes, because we're competitors, we're high achievers, is we kind of start at the top. We try to address the big things. And a lot of the common lingo that we try to do is we do self-talk, we try to change our thoughts, and that sounds great. But if your nervous system is dysregulated, if there's that anxiety, and a lot of you who know what I'm talking about, who have felt it, it's a physical level, right? It's something that's happening within your body. You can't think your way out of that.
Right.
So how do I do both? That's a great question. You want to start with the fundamentals. You want to start with, how do I regulate my nervous system? So this is your breath work. This is your grounding skills, right? This is just kind of getting to know your body and your mind, how they're communicating with each other, because your mind and body are always in communication, right? So some of the things, even if you're not in a place where you're talking to somebody, or maybe you're thinking about it, there's certain things that you can do. The best things you could do to start to regulate your system: make sure you're getting enough sleep. It's one of the biggest mistakes athletes make, is we wear ourselves so thin, our schedules are crazy, we're not sleeping enough. That tells your nervous system that, like, I'm already operating at a deficit, right? There's already vulnerability factors. Your nutrition is actually something else that directly impacts your mental health.
For sure.
Then, like I said, your nervous system is like, some of you might not know what I'm talking about. That's your fight or flight, or your rest and digest. So you two nervous systems, essentially. I won't go into details on that, but is it like my heart's racing? Do I notice that I'm kind of consistently on edge? Is my jaw always clenched? That is something you could start right now, is just starting to take inventory, or start to notice what your body tends to do. Can I start to relax my shoulders? Can I start to breathe through my diaphragm, my belly breath, instead of my chest is actually a shallow breath? So what are things I can start to do right away. But again, I would say if you feel like it's spilling over, your mental health is always going to be more important or more fundamental because that's what you're building off of. Your mental performance will inevitably improve once your mental health improves. That's the Cliff Notes version.
I love it. I love it. Team, keep the questions coming in, but what I want to do is I want to keep this moving down the field. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is mental health, the foundation of performance. So Mia, why don't you go ahead and get into a little bit of that? We have some questions firing right away.
Yeah, so we've luckily we've kind of already tapped into this topic of mental health being the foundation of your performance. Again, if it's the quality of your well-being, think about we all have emotions, we all have core emotions, right? And if you're here tonight, if you're competing at a high school or especially collegiate or professional level, you care, right? And that's all driven by emotion and connection. So it's not the enemy, it's just how do I understand what I experience? How do I manage what I experience? How do I control those responses and reactions? How do I reset that? So you see how the foundational piece is your mental health, the fact that you have emotional experiences, how you understand what emotions you're having. The mental performance is how do I now take back that control in intensive settings, right? Same thing with your thought process. We all have this inner talk, right? That we are constantly experiencing. I always tell my athletes, we're having 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot. And 90% of those thoughts are not new. They're repetitive thoughts. So whatever you're hearing a lot of. So you want to also, as a mental health perspective, of you want to understand the quality of like, what is your foundational self-talk like? How are you talking to yourself? How are you treating yourself on a daily basis? Guess what? That's going to impact how you showed up. Because if you're responding to a mistake, you're going to go right back to your default setting. Is it very critical? Is it comparison? Right. So do you see how the two are very much tied together, but there's differentiations? Your regulation, right? Am I typically, if my baseline's here, am I typically running high? Am I typically kind of shutting down? And again, if my baseline's here, something goes wrong, I'm more likely to go right into that fight or flight. So again, mental health, and then what are kind of the things that might push it over the edge? How do I regulate, especially in intensive situations? How do I stay calm, cool, and collected? How do I readjust, or how do I refocus? So that's how, especially in the world of athletics, we see mental health and mental performance really working together.
Right on. Hey, Mia, Kelly, D1 softball. I've been dealing with anxiety for months, but I kept thinking I could handle it on my own. I'm sure that's a common mistake. Now
So
it's affecting my my sleep, my performance, and my relationships. I know I've waited too long. How do I start getting support when I'm already in a deep trench?
Kelly, my dear, it is never too late. You have never waited too long. Obviously, it's ideal to catch it earlier. This is a very common experience. And you know what? Sometimes we do adjust a few things and the anxiety goes down. So don't give yourself a hard time if you felt like it's something you could tackle and it's not. For future reference, guys, and this is part of why we're doing this too, you don't want to wait until that. You don't want to feel like you're in this alone, because you never are. You never have to be, right? But I also want to emphasize the point of it's never too late. I don't
Right.
want you to think the trench is too deep or the hill's too high, nothing like that, right? You guys will always have the means, and it is a one step at a time thing, right? You wouldn't ever walk into the weight room and go, I'm going to max out today, right?
Right.
You got to ease into do. You got to stretch. You got to find out where your rates are. So you kind of do that with your mental health as well. You kind of want to just take inventory first of how much sleep am I getting? What is going on in my relationships? And you want to do that very non-judgmentally, right? For all of you out there listening, you can't have this like, oh, I don't want to acknowledge it because that doesn't feel good. And I know I'm not, that's okay. You got to have the awareness to start addressing it. So I would almost take notes or even have categories. And this is something anyone could do is rate your satisfaction 1 to 10. How is my sleep 1 to 10? Or maybe you want to get specific with the hours or the quality or how many times you're waking up. Same thing with your nutrition, same thing with your thoughts. Like, how intense is the anxiety on a day-to-day basis? Or how many arguments am I getting into with my coach, my parents, my significant other, my teammates, right? Just start somewhere, take notice, and then that will help kind of create a path moving forward. But especially when you work with a professional, so that's something I do foundationally is we kind of say what's going on And what's the first step? And there are so many evidence-based skill sets that will guide you through that process. I promise it is not too late. And
Right
your
on.
trenches might feel intimidating, but it's not, probably not as deep as it feels. It's because you're trying to do it alone, but you can absolutely work your way out of it.
Hey Mia, I'm Danny. I play water polo in the Ivy League. I only reach out for help when I'm in full crisis mode. Panic attacks, can't eat, can't sleep. Then I go to therapy, feel better, and stop going. Then it happens
Mhm.
again. Why do I keep doing this, and how do I break the cycle?
Yeah, Danny, thank you, because you are not alone. This is like, it's a great, I always try to make sports analogies so you guys can kind of get it. Would you show up to practice on Monday, take off the whole week, and then try to play in a game on Friday?
Right.
Probably
Yeah.
not, right? Consistency is key. That's how we learn, consistency and repetition. So that's why some of you guys might get annoyed at practice. You're doing the same drills over and over again, even like the most foundational skills, right? I'm a soccer player. You're still doing passing drills, even as a professional, right? You're doing it for a reason. Your body and your mind are constantly at work. So the more consistency and repetition you get, the more you build that muscle. So think of it as a mental muscle too. You get the concepts when you are in it, it works. But once you step away from it, other things get in the way. So the more you can expose yourself consistently to these skill sets. Now, listen, if for some reason you don't have the means or you're not able to consistently access help, which we could maybe talk about at the end how you can, if that seems to be a barrier, because there's ways to go through insurance. There's a lot of different resources out there. But if you're having trouble, you could hold yourself accountable by maybe you're listening to a podcast, or you're doing a meditation every day, or you're starting to journal. So there are things you could do even on your own to maintain consistency. Because even if you are seeing someone regularly, chances are it's only once a week for an hour. There's a lot of time that
Sure.
happens outside of that hour, right? And what you do with the skill sets is honestly even more important. You can learn all the things in the world, but if you don't apply them, right? Same thing with practice. If you go through a practice and you're doing all these things and you're running plays and you don't do it in the game, it's not going to work. So it's not just again, happy that you're reaching for help when you need it. And if there is a takeaway today, when you guys address mental health and mental performance proactively, it's like you have a cheat sheet. It's like you know the plays in advance, right? I know it's not going to be perfect, but I know when this happens, I know what to do about it. Or I know when I'm starting to feel a certain way, or my body's starting to react a certain way, or I'm thinking a certain way. I know what that looks like. I know what that means, and I know how to address it. That's what the proactive work does for you. It helps the hills feel not as steep and the trenches not feel as deep. So that's really the function of it. It's okay if this has been the pattern. It's a very common thing. A lot of the times we feel better, we start doing better. So we're like, oh, I'm good. But then those habits fall away, right? And that's where we go back to square one. So that's really the cycle that you're in. And again, it's a very common cycle.
Awesome. Mia, can you address burnout? And what I mean by that is I'm not struggling right now, but I've seen teammates as well as my roommate burn out, and I don't
Mm.
want that to be me. What can I do proactively to build mental health resilience before I need it? Like, what does proactive mental health training actually look like?
I love this question. So interesting take on this. From my perspective, burnout is very much about your recovery, your mental and physical recovery as an athlete. When this is not happening is when we get burnt out. Okay. So you are asking so much of yourselves, and we don't realize, we're like, oh, physically, but we don't compute the mental recovery part. But guess what? What's informing your body?
Right.
What's informing your decisions? Your mind, right, is working overtime. So you are exhausting both of those things, right? When you ask something of one, you're asking of the other too. So in terms of this, the burnout question, athletes struggle with this for so many reasons. One, I don't think there's enough allocation to physical recovery, let alone mental recovery. There's not nearly enough allocated to that. But there's also this myth where more is better, right? And a lot of you guys, I bet, would agree with me. And I know I used to feel this way too. You almost feel guilty or like something's wrong or like anxious when you're not doing something, right? So that
Right.
taking a day off. So the burnout conversation also needs to be had alongside a conversation of what does intentional recovery look like? It's not just sitting in bed watching Netflix or just not doing anything that day. It's your relationship again with your nutrition, your stretching, your sleep, your activities. Like you need to fuel the tank again. I say you guys are sports cars, right? If you put regular gas in a sports car, what's going to happen?
Right.
It's gonna fail out, right? So you guys have to make sure it's not just you're taking time off or you're not doing certain things. What are you doing? What are you doing to fill your tank? How are you enjoying yourself? How are you having perspective outside of what it is that you're doing too? I think it's so easy. We get in that like tunnel vision of it's everything and it's all consuming. But when you start to create practices, and it doesn't have to be anything monumental. I have had so many athletes that end up dedicating time to Legos, right? It's like something that's involved. Or again, I know screens are a thing. You want to try to do something that's very mindful, that is interactive puzzles. People do Sudoku, read books. Like there's a million things. Talk to family members, be with friends, but you really have to ground yourself too. So to answer your question, it's a common thing. And if you want to proactively work on this, those are the kind of things you want to do. You want to accumulate positives. What are things you're doing for yourself in stolen moments? It doesn't have to be you have a day off. It's like, what am I doing with this 5 minutes? What am I doing with this half hour? Am I doom scrolling? Am I, what am I doing? Or am I actually like taking time to decompress? Am I doing something that's filling me back up? And am I getting some fresh air? We're walking into that time of year where it's going to be beautiful outside and you want to get fresh air and you want to be different types of active than just the one thing or sport that you're doing. So I hope that answers that question.
For sure. For sure. Mia, everyone talks about preventing mental health issues. I'm a junior on my high school basketball team. I'm a 2-year starter going into my senior year, and everyone is starting to ask me questions about NIL, where am I going to college, recruiting. How do you prevent something you don't know is coming? What are the signs I should be watching for in myself?
I love this question. And I think the preventative work is a big like trigger word now, right? Like we're preventive work, and that's important. I actually want to challenge you guys, instead of working towards avoiding something, I want you to work towards building something. You would never, I hope you guys don't. You wouldn't go to practice and be like, I'm going to train, so I hope I don't miss the shot. You want to train so I can make the shot. And even that framework, when you're approaching something in a positive way of building your capacity, building your knowledge, building your framework, right? Like that's an easier approach too. When you approach something as trying to prevent, like to keep something from happening, you're almost triggering that a different part of your brain that's more fear-based, right? Trying to avoid something is actually a lot harder than trying to attain something or achieve something. So with that, like I'm trying to prevent mental health struggles. Yes, there is truth to that, right? We obviously do want to do that work. But for those of you that are kind of just dipping your toes into this, I almost want you to think of it as I'm trying to build my mental and emotional capacity. I'm trying to build my skill sets. I'm trying to build my well-being, right? And that happens from some of the most foundational things that we've talked about: sleep, nutrition, like the quality of your exercise, your recovery, to kind of those more higher ticket things, those skill sets. So you're talking about your self-talk, you're talking about um, recovery mistakes, all of those things. So um, inevitably, again, more is going to come at you. You got to give yourself more. And there's so many different resources. Again, whether you're starting with a podcast, these guys have a great one. Whether you're starting with a book or just, whatever you're willing to start with, that's my big takeaway today, is start somewhere. And you'll see at the end, I have a quiz. So you could even gauge for yourself, just kind of where am I? What's my score? What resonates? What doesn't? Where are my strengths? That's another thing I think we forget too. When we talk about mental health, I feel like it's always fixing and like trying to get rid of the negative. Big part of mental health is actually emphasizing your strengths and things you're good at and things that you like and appreciate, and your why and all that good stuff too. So yes, inevitably more is going to come at you. I love that you're already thinking about this, because a lot of people again don't, or just don't even have the framework. I didn't even know what any of this was when I was playing, right? I didn't
Right.
know what it was until well after I was going through my master's program and going, oh. So you
Right.
guys are ahead of the game. The fact that you're here and you're showing up, you are doing great work. So yeah, I would say in terms of getting ahead, try to think of more of like, what am I doing for myself rather than what am I trying to avoid?
Awesome. Hey, Mia, Malik, Division One quarterback. I always hear my position coach say that your mind is your most valuable equipment, but I've always focused on my body, strength, speed, conditioning. How does mental health actually impact physical performance? Can anxiety really take over and make me slower or weaker?
Absolutely. Oh, this is such a loaded question. We could have a whole webinar just on this topic.
For sure.
So, yes, as athletes, we are trained to condition our bodies, our motor skills, right? All these things that you're talking about, which is excellent. What's informing that? Right? You're getting messages from your brain. Now there's this interesting concept called like call it your governor, right? So I'm in South Florida. If you were to go rent a speedboat or a jet ski, they have something on it called a governor, and it's there for your protection. It keeps you from going over a certain speed, right? So think of like we all kind of have these internal governors, right? When we sense fear or intimidation or something might be wrong or a mistake, it limits you by nature because we're human at the end of the day, right? Even though we're athletes, we're human. So it's trying to protect you. So the more you have that relationship with your mental health and your capacity, it actually raises that governor much higher. Now, what does this look like? Just an example for our sake is if you have anxiety going into a game, right? So that fear based, right? You're naturally going to be more tense, which was does what? It impacts your range of motion. So now your mind says it's anticipating. Your body gets tense, is a little bit more reserved, maybe not as quick. You're more hesitant, but that reinforces a message to your brain, rut something's wrong here, right? So that it's they're not functioning differently. They're constantly in communication. So that's where that cycle happens. It can actually make you slower, more hesitant, because at the end of the day, your brain can't distinguish between playing in a football game or running out of a 5 alarm fire, God forbid, but it's the same physiological response when you go into that fight or flight. So the more you have that awareness, that control, that capacity, you're going to be able to stay calmer. You're going to be able to reset better. And it's actually going to help things like your range of motion, your reaction time, your processing, right? Especially as a quarterback, my goodness, you have so much to work through. And when you go into that fear-based mind or you start to edge towards fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex, get fancy with you guys for a moment, that front part of your brain that's in charge of logic, reasoning, all that problem solving, it shuts down. It's like, I don't need to be here. You just need to get out of this situation. So that is a huge disservice that ends up happening for athletes is we're like, why do I keep making the same mistake? Now I'm down the rabbit hole. Now I can't even think straight. Just get me off the field, right? Some of us get to that place. But even if you're not all the way in that place, there's still things that you could do proactively to build again that capacity and that functioning, that your decision making is better, you're more collected, calm, cool, collected. Your all those things are happening at just a higher level. So that's what that work would do.
Awesome, awesome. This is a tough one, a sad one. Hi, Mia. I have performance anxiety. Both my parents were collegiate athletes, and they expect me to be one as well. My heart races. I can't breathe. My hands shake before competition. I know it's mental, but it feels physical. How does
It is
anxiety
physical.
actually? What's that?
It is physical. I want to validate that it's physical and mental. It is happening in your body too. Again, mind, body are connected. So yes,
For
I want to
sure.
acknowledge it's happening.
How does anxiety actually work in my body, and how can I control it?
That's a fantastic question. Something I want to say to you guys too is that there's a lot of times when you're an athlete, a lot of there's you start because you love the game, you're interested, you want to try it, and then you enjoy it. As you get older, oftentimes there's these external pressures. You want to have a certain record or have certain stats or get X amount of money or get a scholarship or your parents want you to, right? You never want to fall out in love with why you started. And you always want to revisit that. You always want to have that perspective. Because at the end of the day, I tell all my athletes this, even at the professional level, I go, the verb is play. You are playing a game. It is an incredible opportunity to build your character, to build your problem solving skills, to build your strength, and all these things you will take and have with you forever, right? You won't always have this game. Even if you go to the Olympics, even if you play at the highest level, at some point you're going to stop. So don't let it override the quality of your experience now. Take what you can from it. It is such an important process. To answer your question in terms of the anxiety piece, it sounds like your nervous system is getting hijacked. So again, that fight or flight response. Now, interestingly enough, and again, we could have a whole nother webinar on this, but your brain wants to make sense of things. So it starts seeing cues, and it has a relationship with it. So for example, putting on your cleats, stepping onto the track, right? For me, it was the track, the timed runs. I was coming back from ACL, MCL, meniscus surgery. And as a soccer player, we had to make a 6:15 time mile. I was in college, pressure's on, you're not making your runs, you're not playing. And I started creating an association of mental relationship with even just seeing the track. My stomach would turn, my heart would start racing, right? So what happens is your brain is very smart and it's trying to work for you, but sometimes it ends up working against you. So there's certain cues that you're probably responding to before it's even happening. So you feel like, again, you're already kind of climbing up the hill before you even got there. So the first thing I would do is try to take inventory or take note of, like, when do I feel the most anxious? What am I seeing? What am I doing? How does my body feel? And then slowly, bit by bit, start to notice your body, start to relax your muscles, start to deepen your breath, smile. People think I'm nuts when I say that, but you see it with professional athletes. There was just something on, there's Steph Curry and a billion people do it, but they smile. And the reason is the muscles in your face directly communicate to your brain. Something was really wrong, you probably wouldn't be smiling. So this sounds counterintuitive, but you want to start to almost trick your brain with your body, because again, they're in communication. So if you start to relax your body and open up and shift your posture and things like that, you're retraining your brain. It's going, oh, I guess we're okay right now. And it's easier said than done. But, and again, that's why you work with a professional. It's something you take steps in. But as far as things you could do and how to understand it instead of getting frustrated or defeated by it, understand your body's just and your brain's just trying to protect you. There's ways to override that, though, with training your nervous system, with relaxing, with, again, muscle relaxation techniques, breathing techniques. There's a million things that you could do to start to rewrite that.
Excellent. This is a good one, Mia. I like this one. I want to get your thoughts on it. Mia, I'm a Division II linebacker. What does optimizing mental health actually mean for an athlete? Like, give me concrete examples. What am I optimizing and how do I know if it's working?
I like that. So optimizing your mental performance, again, you have to have a gauge. And I think a lot of times, like with physical training, it's easy, right? I'm lifting this weight, now I'm lifting this weight. I had this many touchdowns, I have this many touchdowns. So it's a little easier to gauge physically with your physical performance. So your mental performance, you kind of want to treat the same way, though. You want to get creative with how you could treat it the same way. And if you're not working with a professional and you want to kind of dabble in this, you can do, if you guys have heard of SMART goals, but ways to kind of get like very specific, measurable, realistic, all that good stuff. Where am I at now? How do I respond to a problem? How do I act or react? What is my emotional response, right? When you kind of start to gauge where you are, optimizing that. And here's the thing, like, what does that look like? Every athlete people are starting to do this. It's going to be the new standard. So if you're not doing it, you're almost behind the game a little bit. So optimizing your mental performance is, again, how are you responding after a mistake? Is it throwing you off for a minute, for 5 minutes, the rest of the game? That's an example, right? You're regulating. If you get emotional or something comes up, like, how are you responding? What are you doing with that? How do you talk to yourself throughout a game? Because you may not think it makes a difference to kind of put yourself down. But guess what? That informs the next thought, the next emotion, and the next action or reaction. So that's what optimizing your mental performance looks like, is how are you making your system work for you? Again, what kind of gas are you putting in the tank, right? It's always working. It's always happening. What's the capacity or what's the level at which it's happening? And you hear, and the cool thing is there's more and more research and evidence coming out in this world of mindfulness, of how it impacts your ability to problem solve, to think clearer, to process information, to reset. So there's actual evidence now and research supporting these findings of when you do these things consistently, when you train your brain like you train your body, the outcomes, if that makes sense.
For sure, for sure. This is a good one. Let's get into this next slide. Team, keep the questions coming. These are outstanding. Mia, do you feel like you're getting challenged?
I love it. These are fantastic questions. You guys are awesome.
Awesome. Let's get into supporting athletes for parents and coaches, and then we'll get into some of those questions because sometimes Aaron and I have dealt with parents that are basically living vicariously through their kids, right? And other times parents are just very hands off. What is your opinion on both those types of parents?
Um, I don't know if I would say going into opinion. I unfortunately both are common, and it's not so much a matter of opinion. I would say it's a matter of function. Um, it's very hard, right? As a parent, you want the best for your kids, and we all are operating off our own information, our own experiences, and I genuinely think parents are trying to do the best they can, right? With what they have and what they know. Maybe it doesn't always compute, maybe it doesn't always translate, maybe it makes it worse, right? So one thing for athletes, I tell you, this might be hard for some of you, but obviously, given you're in a safe environment, a supportive environment, you know your parents love you. They don't know what they don't know. So if
Right.
something doesn't work for you, it's okay to have that conversation. Be like, Mom, Dad, I love how invested you are, but when you are screaming at the top of your lungs and I'm trying to focus in a game, it's not translating, right? Or when there's a lot of pressure to like play at the next level and stuff, just kind of sitting down and be like, I'm interested and I want it to feel like it's my decision because at the end of the day, I'm gonna keep showing up and I want to feel confident in that. So that's kind of the player side of like they don't know what they don't know, and sometimes you can teach them a little bit or reinforce. And you don't want to always tell them not to do, you actually want to tell them what to do as well. So
Sure.
if something really works for you or you appreciated something they did, tell them because they don't know and they probably don't hear it enough either. Now, on the parent side of things, it's so hard in this world, right? Some of us want to fix it, right? You want to make it better for them. You don't want them to be anxious. You don't want them to be overwhelmed. You want them to have the best education or the best opportunity or the best scholarship or whatever, right? Walking alongside is so much better than trying to pull from it forward or push from behind or pull from behind, right? So kind of again, if you're a parent or even a coach, like meet your athlete where they're at, work to understand where they're at and just kind of, ask them what they need, right?
For
Get
sure.
curious. So I think, whether you're hands off or hands on, um, it's more of function. And again, like different athletes are different. Some athletes do really well with being pushed and held accountable and others shut down. Some people need space and want to kind of go through themselves. Other people really need a hand and a maybe even a pathway. So everyone's different. I'd say it's function over form here. But the big thing is, if you're an athlete, speak up if you can. If not, find a mentor or someone who can listen to you. And if you are a parent or a coach, listen up or ask. You don't always have to know the answer. Don't assume you know the answer either, unless you've had those conversations. Um, but yeah, I genuinely try to believe everyone's doing the best they can. It's just you do what you know or what you've been exposed to. So until you know differently or know better is when we try to do better.
For sure. This is a good question. This is a if you knew then what I know now. And I'm about to transition from high school to college, and everyone says it's a huge mental adjustment. What can I
Mhm.
do now before I get there to prepare myself mentally for that transition? And what did you do, Mia?
Um, so fun fact, the end of my senior year, I went into a friendly tournament for soccer. That was when I tore my ACL, MCL, meniscus. I was already
Oh,
committed the summer
shit.
prior. It was literally May of my senior year, and I felt like my world came crumbling down. Had to call my coach, tell her what happened. Anyway, I won't get into the gist of it. If you ever want to hear my story, I'm happy to chat. Something I kind of end up talking about when I work with athletes, because there's obviously the injury component, the mental and physical recovery. But my experience was a bit unique because going into college, I dedicated all my time and energy to my physical recovery. What I messed up on, if I'm being honest with you guys, was especially because coming off of surgery, you're not sleeping well. No one's comfortable after that type of reconstructive surgery, right? So my routine and my fundamentals were so off. My appetite was off because I wasn't exercising it much, right? So I went into college and I did myself a huge disservice. My sleep was off, my nutrition was off, my schedule's all over the place. We pulled the 7 a.m. time slot for practice my freshman year, which meant you're I was in the training room. I was leaving at 4:30 every morning because I had to be in the training room before practice, before warm-ups. You had to get to the, do the math, right? Start counting backwards. All you guys know how it goes. So that was a huge disservice I did. So my while it might seem physical, what I would suggest is get in as much of a solid routine as you can now. Create structure, create like, what are my responsibilities? How can I be consistent? Because the more you have that down, it's going to serve you leaps and bounds when you're in a more intensive environment. That's your foundational piece. As far as, and it does affect your mental capacity, right? So as far as that though, too, again, your self-awareness, how you're talking to yourself while you're training, how you're responding to tasks. Are you dreading, like if you're in your summer workout packet, are you dreading opening it up? Are you telling yourself, I can't do it? Does it seem too intimidating? That's something you want to address too, is you want to really shift into, how do I make it happen? What do I do? How do I get 1% better, rather than rather than slipping into that comparison. You have to treat yourself like, I belong here, I earn my place here, and really kind of establish that presence right off the bat.
Awesome. Mia, can you read this question from Brian?
Yes, I can absolutely read it. Can you discuss how substance use, including alcohol, nicotine, and weed vaping, affects performance, recovery, decision-making, accountability, and the ability to be a great teammate? This is a great question. So there's so many places to start here. Is there any way you could keep the question on the screen? Just so I get, amazing. Thank you, Brian, for this. So substance use is actually something that's very common in athletes for a number of reasons. One, college life, right? There's that, especially if you're talking college athletes. Two, something that's not talked about a lot is the potential for abuse because of stress,
Yep.
because of recovery, because a lot of times you're told not to. So then when you overindulge and it becomes a dependence thing. There's also the unfortunate truth that a lot of us get injured and get prescribed certain things, and it's really hard to come off of them. So you develop tolerances. So there's so many different components as to why these things kick on. No one's immune from it. So having that awareness and just being able to be honest with yourself and ask for help if you feel like it's getting out of control, that's one aspect of this conversation. The other aspect of this conversation, how does it impact you? So when you do, like, let's just take alcohol, for example, because that's a common one, right? Hopefully I'm speaking to everyone who's of age, but when you consume alcohol, your body has to work overtime just to process that poison essentially that you're putting into your body. So what does that do? It takes away from your other processes. It takes away from your muscle recovery, from your digestion, right? It takes away from all these other things that would essentially be working for you if it wasn't trying to focus on this other thing, getting rid of this other thing. As far as like nicotine, tobacco, all these other things, vaping, there are physical side effects, right? In terms of your breathing, your lungs, your muscle recovery that are happening that naturally will inhibit you in terms of what you're able to do. So that's the physical side. The mental side is what people don't realize is this is something that's impacting your brain chemistry. Alcohol is a depressant. So that doesn't just mean I'm sad or anxiety is a term people use. It is actually shifting your brain chemistry. So you are slowing down, you're getting an agitated process, or again, the anxiety, it's like you're introducing something that is now going to create more intensive anxiety or more intensive response than it would previously. So you're putting yourself at a huge deficit and you're essentially giving everyone else the upper hand. But even more importantly, just your well-being at large is getting sacrificed. Now, again, think about when you're playing with a sprained ankle. It doesn't feel so good, right? That's kind of mentally and physically what's happening when you are using substances and try to perform. It really does impact you physically and mentally, and especially emotional, right? It's if your brain chemistry is changing, your ability to process emotions or handle emotions or what those emotions even are getting created up here. So that is something that will obviously impact you as well, and going to impact your dynamics with your teammates, your coaches, your responsiveness, maybe your defensiveness. Again, we get more irritable when we're depressed or anxious, or when we're not rested or we're not recovering. So all that impacts your recovery and just your performance as well.
You know what, Mia? I want to dig a little deeper into this one because this one hit. Brian, thank you so much, Brian. I'm going to reach out to you tomorrow. We're connected on LinkedIn. Mia, this is something that hits home close to me, and I'm going to kind of pull back the curtain and open my kimono. I actually was trained as a triathlete and Ironman at a very high level. I can't believe I'm disclosing this here. I actually trained on cocaine and I raced on Adderall. And then because I was pushing so hard, injuries were part of the landscape of sports. So then it was Percocet and Oxy to come down, and then a little Ambien, and the list goes on and on. Somebody once asked me, why do you do that? Because I actually said that I was afraid I couldn't do it without it. How can you address the psychological dependency that I had? And I haven't raced in 2 years, and I'm
Mhm.
totally sober, but something I want to do is I want to go back into that arena to race again sober, just to prove that I can do it. Can you address the dependency side of using drugs and performance enhancing drugs?
Yeah, you just raised a really valuable point. So there's the physical dependence and there's also a psychological dependence that gets built, right?
Right.
The physical dependence is your actual chemistry that gets changed and adjusted based on the substances that you're introducing. Again, these are foreign substances. Your body's not used to having them. So once your chemistry changes and adapts them and gets used to them, once those go away, you're going to have side effects or withdrawal symptoms, right? Some of us might be familiar with the term.
Sure.
So that we could go in depth with this, but that's kind of the very basic explanation for physically what's happening in your body. It's literally getting altered and changed. And once you take away those things that you're introducing, your body is going to respond differently and have an adjustment period, which can be actually medically very dangerous depending on the substance, right? Now, if you talk about the psychological dependence, which I think happens a lot, especially with like weed or vaping, it's, oh, I have to do this to calm down. I can't calm down or I can't sleep unless I do this, which typically is not true. But we create this mental and emotional relationship or dependence with the thing as like a security blanket. Whether it's like I can't do it without this or I can't take a test without this. um, so obviously I'm not speaking to like Adderall is a common one. If you are diagnosed with ADHD or something and it's an appropriate, I personally think it's overdiagnosed. There's a lot of skill sets and things you can do to manage it otherwise. But again, if this is something that has been established by a medical professional, you know that you need it. That's very different than, oh, I don't need it, but I do better with it. And then now you're creating a psychological dependence of I can't do this without this. And that's a very slippery slope as well. So understanding the two is important to begin with, but also understanding that you can intervene at both levels. And please don't feel like you have to do it on your own because you want to make sure you're doing it safely, especially with the physical component, depending on what substance you may or may not be using. And then the the psychological component is understanding just what that talk sounds like. Again, the awareness of, do I notice this language, whether it's around vaping or alcohol or whatever it might be? Do I feel like I need it or I have to use it to calm down, to reset, to decompress, to socialize, to whatever, right? To show up. And guys, Thomas is not alone. He is far from the first person to have this experience at high school, college, or collegiate, or professional or beyond level. So this is something that does happen with all different types of substances that athletes feel like they have to use to get by and get through.
So right on the heels of that, we got a question here. I'm on medication for anxiety. Does that mean I'm not mentally tough? Does it give me an unfair advantage? I feel like I'm cheating somehow by taking medication.
You're not cheating, and it doesn't mean you're mentally tough. I'm not a prescriber, but I've done a lot of training and I understand this enough to kind of give you guys a brief synopsis, right? Your brain has a chemistry. So whenever you take a medication, it's just seeking balance, right? It's just trying to find balance of that chemistry. So you're not cheating. You're trying to return to a baseline that works for your brain and your body to function off of. So you're not cheating. You're just getting back to a baseline. Some of us can actually change our brain chemistry through, again, sleep, nutrition, exercise routine, stress management. So there's actually ways you can do that without medication. Now, again, we're all human at the end of the day. Sometimes there's a physiological component, so again, a physical component that we just can't control or might be a little bit outside of our control. A lot of times when you take medication, it gives you a bit of the ability to learn the coping skills. So hopefully you can do it without. Sometimes it is a longer term plan. That depends on the person and the situation. Doesn't mean you're not mentally tough. Does not mean you're cheating. You obviously want to make sure your well-being is the priority.
Awesome. This is a great one, Mia. I tried therapy once, and the therapist didn't understand sports at all. She kept telling me to just quit if it stresses you out. How do I find someone who actually gets what it's like to be an athlete?
Work with someone who was an athlete.
Right.
Yeah, the cool thing is in both like the traditional mental health field and mental performance field, there are so many, not so many, excuse me. There are more and more athletes that were former athletes or competitive athletes that are in that field. So I'm not saying you have to work with someone who's an athlete. There are some people that don't understand it. That's it. That's not the first time I've heard that. Unfortunately, I get a lot of feedback from athletes with the counseling centers too. Like they're referring me to the counseling center. This person has no idea what I'm talking about. They're telling me to quit or just, do whatever because of that. And obviously that's a very invalidating piece of advice when you're in the thick of things and it's something you love and you don't want to give up on, but it's so hard. Both things can be true. You can love something and want to keep going and feel like it's tearing you apart, unfortunately. So, I would say one suggestion is working with someone who has had the experience of being an athlete, a competitive athlete. If that's not possible, try to work with a therapist who is trained in certain ways that it's more oriented towards solutions. So cognitive behavioral therapy, if you guys want to write this down, is a really big one. And that's something that's actually has been adopted and kind of specialized in sports performance and all that good stuff, sports psychology. So it basically bridges off of the cognitive behavioral therapy. But it's basically like, what do I do now? So you don't want to just sit in the problem. You also want to kind of work with someone who has the evidence-based strategies to work with you through the problem, if that makes sense.
For sure. We're getting into the parents here. We got a couple of parents chiming in. What should we say in the car after a bad game? We want to be supportive about everything, but everything we say seems to make it worse. Should we talk about the game or just not talk about it? Let her bring it up or just ignore it?
Love this. Again, you guys don't have to know the answer. You get in the car after a bad game, that awkward silence. You can say like, "How did you feel about it?" Or, "Are you ready to talk about it, or do you want some time?" Another thing you could actually do is flip the script of like, you can make an observation. You don't want to assume, but you could say like, "It seemed like that was a tough game. Like, what do you think was something you did well? Or like, how do you think you handled it?" Right? So you can actually kind of make a reflection. You don't want to make an assumption, but you could say like, "It seemed like," or "It looked like," or "I felt like." You could use an I statement too. You don't want to say like, "You really seem to be having a hard time," or "You seem like you seem upset." Like that might yield a defensive response. So just kind of making an observation of, how did you feel like that went? Or, "Hey, like I'm here if you want to decompress or you want to vent." Like, I wouldn't say stay in the venting, but if that opens the conversation, it's also an opportunity of like, what do you think could have been different? Or is there anything I can do to support you or anything like that? So don't feel like you have to have the answer.
Awesome, awesome. Team, we want to be respectful of Mia's time because we're closing in on an hour. I'm going to take the final two questions here for Mia. I think, Mia, these are great ones because I think it affects everybody. Our daughter's mental health took a nosedive when she got on social media. The comparison, the comments, the pressure to post. Should we take her phone away or is it just avoiding the problem?
Is this high school or college
Yeah,
level, did they
it's high
say?
school. Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, I think limiting exposure is important. Is it sustainable? At some point, she's going to go to college. And especially if she wants to play in college, she needs to have the skill set to know how to navigate it, right? So I think the one truth is you definitely want to limit time. There's actually ways in the settings to do that, that you are only allowing maybe an hour of time or something like that. You also want to educate your kids. And again, maybe it's educating yourself first, but understanding algorithms and helping them understand that you don't even have to like or engage with the post, but if you're watching it for a longer time, it takes note of that and it will give you more of that. So your environment is such an impact to you. What people forget, especially athletes and kids, is it's going to spit more at you. So you have to kind of take the wheel on what it's spitting at you. So look up again, if that creates anxiety or comparison, maybe you start to work with them on who are you following that's a positive role model? Who inspires
Right.
you? What are you seeing in your feed consistently? Kind of doing a cleanse, a social media cleanse or a spring cleaning. Since we're in that time of year, right? Frame it that way. But just help them understand like that is your environment. And for a lot of them, that's maybe a primary environment. You want to make sure it's something that's working for you, not against you.
Awesome. Team, this is our final question, and then I'm going to ask Mia how people can get a hold of her. And so keep these questions coming, but this is the final question. Mia, our son is dealing with pressure from sports and academics and recruiting. We can see it's affecting him. How do we help him manage multiple sources of pressure without trying to solve the problem for him?
I love that. And I love that you guys notice like it's not like I can't fix it for him. Again, I'm such a believer in the power of like curiosity. Like ask him like what's the hardest thing right now? What's creating the most stress for you? And then help him maybe create some systems or find additional support around it. If there is a way that you can support him with it, if he's able to articulate or vocalize, like, hey, if you guys did this for me or with me, that would be helpful. Again, obviously, given it's appropriate for you to do for him. But it's okay to walk alongside or again with somebody and help them problem solve. You don't want to do it for them because it takes away their ability to figure it out themselves. So maybe at first it's him watching you do something or looking something up, and then you kind of go do it with him, and then you kind of give in smaller doses, like what does it look like for him to do it? But ask what the pain points are, ask what's the most stressful, maybe even a rating scale of like what academics 1 to 10 right now. 10 is like I just want to throw in the towel. 1 is I'm totally fine. Where are we at? So and then why? And it helps them build their awareness too, because sometimes the perceived pressure is actually greater than the actual pressure or the actual situation. I can't tell you how many again high achievers or straight A students that I was having a panic attack thinking I failed the test and I was up for nights and I ended up getting it at a 95, right? So helping them kind of understand and distinguish what's stress versus anxiety. Stress being like anticipating something that's going to happen versus anxiety anticipating something that may or may not happen. So being able to kind of distinguish what's healthy stress versus things that are working against you, what is the biggest area of concern, and how can I support you in that? How can we work together in this, and let them take the lead? And if they're not sure, again, there's always ways to consult with again a professional or the school or a coach and get some feedback on starting points too.
That's incredible. Team, time flies when you're having fun. We've been here for an hour, and we cannot thank you guys enough. Mia, other than this QR code that we have on the screen, thank you for that, Aaron, where you get an opportunity to take the mental performance quiz. Mia, where can people get a hold of you, whether it's a website, social media, or your email?
So my 2 major spots on social media, I'm on Instagram at the Mental Performance Expert. Feel free to follow, connect, message, any of those things. LinkedIn, I'm at Mia Gardner-Zambarano. Maybe we can share my direct contact with you, but if you look me up from here, you'll probably find it. Or you could just go to my website and you'll find both my handles on there too. It's just thementalperformanceexpert.com or www.thementalperformanceexpert.com. So there's a ton of ways you can access me. You can schedule a complimentary consultation. That's free time to set like 15 minutes aside to talk on the phone, ask me questions, pick my brain, see if something might be right for you, or even get additional resources. But yeah, those are the best ways to reach me.
Awesome, team. Mia, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Team, there's a QR code to get a hold of Mia and Aaron if you'd like at blueprintbluechip.com. But it's not about us tonight. It's all about Mia, and it's all about your mental health and your sports performance. Team, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, Mia. Thank you, Aaron. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you all.